The Subcommittee on Energy will come to order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare recesses of this subcommittee at any time. I want to welcome you to today's hearing entitled Department of Energy Oversight, the Office of Fossil Energy. I recognize myself for 5 minutes for an opening statement. Again, welcome to today's Energy Subcommittee hearing examining the Department of Energy's Office of Fossil Energy. Today, we will hear from the Department on the research, development, demonstration, and commercialization activities in the Office of Fossil Energy and the impact DOE's fossil energy programs have on the energy market and the U.S. economy. Fossil fuels are America's dominant energy source and provide over 80% of energy around the world. The International Energy Agency estimates that even if the aggressive regulations required to meet the Paris Climate Agreement are implemented, fossil fuels will still account for over 40% of global energy use in the year 2050. With those statistics in mind, DOE should prioritize the type of early-stage research in fossil energy that will lead to next-generation technology to access our natural resources, move fossil fuels safely to consumers, and then use those fuels more efficiently in our cars and in our power plants. Through the national labs, the department should take the lead on fossil energy technology innovation, conducting the foundational research that allows the private sector to commercialize groundbreaking technology. Unfortunately, that is not the type of budget proposal we're discussing today. In the DOE fiscal year 2017 budget request, it is clear that fossil energy innovation is not the priority for the Obama administration. While the DOE budget proposal regularly offers aspirational goals backed by significant spending in renewable energy research and development, the budget for fossil energy is cut year after year. This year is no exception, with a $32 million cut to fossil energy R&D. When compared to the proposed $2.1 billion with the B dollar increase to renewable energy, there's no question about where this administration wants to innovate. And what's worse, instead of research designed to increase fossil energy production through innovation or cut the cost of electricity from fossil fuels with new technology, the budget proposal for fossil energy is singularly focused on emissions management, or, quote, impact mitigation, end quote, as the budget describes it. Simply put, the vast majority of DOE fossil energy research and development programs have been reduced to managing emissions to comply with EPA regulations. But over-regulation is not the way to innovate. And the Department of Energy shouldn't be dedicating limited taxpayer resources to proving commercial-scale technology just to back up EPA rules. DOE's research infrastructure should be used to develop groundbreaking technology, not to move that technology to the commercial market. By focusing on justifying regulations and rushing to scale up today's technology, the department has repeatedly put taxpayer dollars at risk on large-scale projects that were not ready for prime time. Even the few successful projects that make it into operation, one in my district, like the Air Products and Chemicals Carbon Capture Sequestration Storage Demonstration Project, are often completed at a great cost to the American taxpayer. DOE does not have adequate expertise or capacity to successfully manage commercial-scale projects. So instead, the department should be focusing limited federal dollars on the fundamental research to lay the foundation for the next technological breakthrough. The Department of Energy has made significant contributions to fossil energy production in the past by funding early-stage research and allowing the private sector to then make that technology work in the energy market. DOE research conducted by the national labs helped develop the technology of hydraulic fracturing that led to the shale revolution. If the department refocuses on technology research and development, I believe that American industry can then capitalize on that research, and they can revolutionize the energy industry once again. But that won't happen if DOE's limited resources remain stovepiped, pun intended. Did you like that pun?
I love everything.
Oh, all right. And focused on regulatory compliance. I want to thank Assistant Secretary Chris Smith for testifying here today, and I look forward to a review of the budget proposal and a discussion about DOE priorities and research goals for fossil energy. By funding early-stage research and development, the Department of Energy could build a foundation for the private sector to bring innovative new fossil energy technologies to market and help grow the American economy, and I would add even help with those emissions. With that, I want to yield to the ranking member for his opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Weber, and thank you, Mr. Smith, for testifying today. Let's be clear about what we're talking about. We're talking about air pollution in the form of carbon dioxide emissions. No company that produces energy in the United States has any incentive to limit its own air pollution unless we create that incentive for it. Now, there are different means to do that. For instance, we can simply order it. That's regulation. My Republican colleagues might decry that as some kind of war on coal. But the fact is, that's one way to actually cut emissions that wouldn't happen otherwise. Second possibility is for the government to actually do it itself. The government could actually produce large-scale projects that would capture carbon as it is being emitted or before it's being emitted into the atmosphere. That would be another solution to the problem. But there is no solution that does not involve some kind of government action, because the private market will not limit pollution when the cost of pollution is zero. So either we have to create a cost of pollution through a market mechanism, or we have to order its limitation one way or the other, as we did with the cap-and-trade bill from several years ago. So one way or another, we need government involvement. I don't particularly see any benefit in saying that it has to be a particular kind of government involvement. I don't think there's any benefit in saying that it has to be small scale or limited to research or anything like that. The ultimate test is it effective or not? Now, with our government being formally committed under the Paris Climate Agreement to limitations on emissions, I think we have to be practical about how we get to those limits, how we achieve those goals. But it's dreaming to think that it's going to happen through the, quote, free market, when the free market has every incentive to continue to pollute as much as it wants. Now, with regard to coal versus other sources of energy, we all know that coal has been on the decline in the United States. I think that one of the reasons, to be fair about this, is the rise of natural gas. Another reason is the rise of solar and other renewable forms of energy. That's actually what's happening with or without carbon sequestration. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, natural gas is projected to surpass coal as the leading source of energy for U.S. power generation this year. And there's a shift to natural gas in the United States that has resulted in reduced greenhouse gas emissions, reduced pollution by carbon dioxide, if you will. And I should remind everybody that although natural gas is a cleaner source of fossil energy, it still emits a very large, substantial amount of carbon dioxide into our atmosphere, unlike renewables. It should be noted that coal and natural gas account for about 65% of U.S. electricity generation together, and that it's possible they may continue to be a major part of U.S. energy, particularly depending upon how fast renewables surge into that gap. Nearly every activity within the Office of Fossil Energy is focused on climate disruption in one form or another, and how that's brought about by fossil energy. I commend you for focusing on that, for focusing on matters of environmental mitigation, because that's a legitimate government role. And it is true that the administration is proposing to cut that overall budget. In order to deliver on the emission targets agreed to in the Paris Climate Agreement, and in the future, carbon capture technology likely will be needed in the United States as well as around the world, particularly in the developing countries that rely continually heavily on coal. According to the International Energy Agency, the world's coal consumption is going up, not down. And since the start of the 21st century, coal production has been actually the fastest growing global energy source, particularly in third world countries. India is entering a period of sustained rapid growth, and its demand for cheap coal generation is surging. China and Southeast Asia are major consumers of coal and continue to bring on new coal-fired power plants each year. And African countries still count on fossil fuels for 77% of their electricity production. Thus, the development of carbon capture technologies is crucial to the worldwide effort to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and keep our planet safe. The United States can lead this effort to solve this challenging technological problem through your research. We can and should capitalize on this unique environmental and economic opportunity. The administration's announcement of fossil energy technology innovation gave us all high hopes for transforming our energy economy, including the advancement of innovative carbon capture technologies like the ones they're working on right now. But looking closer to the details, I realize that we may fall short of making any significant progress in reducing the environmental impact of fossil fuels through carbon pollution. I'm hoping that this hearing provides a clearer explanation of the significant cuts within the Office of Fossil Fuel Energy's Advanced Energy Systems Program budget that have been proposed, and among other areas. Also, I'd like to hear about how DOE plans to better steward large demonstration and pilot projects going forward, since I believe that they may well be necessary to meet our goals of reducing carbon pollution. I hope our conversation today can help to highlight some of these needed improvements, and I thank the Chairman and the witness and yield back.
Thanks, gentlemen. The Chair now recognizes the Chairman of the full committee, Chairman Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today we will examine the Department of Energy Office of Fossil Energy's Research and Development budget for coal, oil, and natural gas. The Fossil Energy Research and Development Program should advance technologies for the, quote, reliable, efficient, affordable, and environmentally sound use of fossil fuels that are important to our nation's security and economic prosperity, end quote, as is their stated mission. Like many of my colleagues, I share this commitment to the long-term use of our nation's most abundant and affordable fuel source. Unfortunately, the administration's proposed budget for fossil energy research and development appears to be at odds with America's energy resources and needs. As in past budget requests, the Obama administration proposes to cut fossil energy R&D, this time by $32 million. DOE apparently counts on Congress to increase funding for fossil energy every year, and I'm glad to see that the House Appropriations Committee has proposed to restore funding for fossil energy R&D again this year. However, this lack of consistency is no way to manage a robust research and development program. While the administration pays lip service to the important role of fossil fuels in a clean energy future, there are fundamental concerns with DOE's approach to fossil energy R&D. DOE refuses to prioritize early-stage research and development for innovative fossil energy exploration and production technologies, or research to develop and integrate technology to make coal-fired power plants more efficient. Instead, the fossil energy R&D program has become singularly focused on carbon dioxide management. DOE should expand access to America's oil and gas resources, not use limited research dollars to help the EPA measure emissions. Unfortunately, fossil energy innovation does not appear to be a priority for this administration. The fiscal year 2017 budget proposal also lacks transparency. The administration proposes to eliminate funding by fuel type in the fossil R&D budget. It argues that this can streamline research for carbon capture and sequestration by coordinating coal and natural gas programs. While CCS for coal and natural gas power plants face similar technology challenges, the proposed restructuring masks how federal dollars are being spent. Congress appropriates funding by fuel type to avoid this problem. Coordination of research, when appropriate, can be cost-effective and save limited resources for research and development, but coordination cannot come at the expense of transparency. The budget proposal also lacks transparency regarding the administration's Mission Innovation Initiative. This is the commitment made during the Paris climate change negotiations to double federal investment in clean energy research and development. According to the budget request, $564 million of the $600 million request for fossil energy R&D is for programs that support mission innovation. However, nowhere in the budget does DOE explain the purpose of mission innovation or the goals for fossil energy research and development conducted in support of the initiative. It should be clear to stakeholders, researchers, and Congress what the Department hopes to accomplish in fossil energy and across DOE. Finally, the Office of Fossil Energy has significant management challenges. Large demonstration projects have been poorly managed by the department, with little transparency on project decisions until a public announcement of pulled funds. The Office of Fossil Energy should fairly enforce deadlines and work with companies to ensure projects can be successful. Instead, it appears the office systematically ignores time and cost limits. This type of sloppy management doesn't help companies that work with DOE to develop groundbreaking technology, and it certainly doesn't benefit the taxpayer. Mr. Chairman, I want to thank our witness, Assistant Secretary Smith, for testifying today, and I look forward to a discussion about the direction and purpose of the fossil energy research programs at DOE. Finally, let me say that regrettably, I have another committee that is starting a markup, or started a markup 20 minutes ago, so I'm going to have to leave, but I hope to return. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The chair now recognizes the ranking member of the full committee, the gentlelady from Texas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And let me express my appreciation to you and to the ranking member for holding this hearing. And I'd also like to thank Assistant Secretary Smith for being here today. The Department of Energy's Office of Fossil Energy plays a critical role in developing technologies and best practices that minimize the environmental impact that we, and indeed the world, cause when we extract and use fossil fuel resources. While I'm also strongly in support of the department's efforts to advance renewables, energy efficiency, nuclear power, and other clean energy sources as quickly as possible, I recognize that we and our international partners are likely going to continue using significant amounts of coal, natural gas, and oil to heat our homes and fuel our vehicles for decades to come. However, we can't bury our heads in the sand if we're serious about tackling climate change. We can't just focus on developing one set of energy sources. As promising as they are, we need to do all of them. This is why I was so excited about the announcement of Mission Innovation, a commitment that the President and leaders from 19 other nations made to double our government-supported clean energy R&D investments over the next 5 years. This is exactly the kind of commitment we need to cover the full range of research and technology development activities required to sufficiently address climate crisis. And yet, just a few months after Mission Innovation was announced, the department proposed large cuts to the outright elimination of a number of worthwhile programs carried out by Assistant Secretary Smith's office, with little justification for those cuts provided in the budget request. Examples include the elimination of the carbon use and reuse program, a 78% cut to gasification systems, a 73% cut to fuel cell research, and a 33% cut to the Advanced Turbine Subprogram. All of these programs aim to make fossil fuel systems cleaner and more efficient, which is consistent with the goals of Mission Innovation. So, Mr. Smith, I hope you can help us better understand the rationale behind these drastic cuts that have been made despite an effort to double overall funding for clean energy R&D in the next 5 years. In addition, we have discussed this before, I'd like you to provide the committee with a clear explanation for the department's rather abrupt shift from support of the Texas Clean Energy Project through the end of the year to your proposal to reprogram the remaining previously appropriated funds for it. Your timely response to the letter from the Texas delegation on this issue was helpful, as was my recent conversation with the Secretary. And the Inspector General report released 2 weeks ago on the project provided further context. However, questions remain regarding the process that the administration followed to come to its decision. I certainly understand that sometimes new research projects aren't successful in meeting their initial goals, and difficult decisions must be made to ensure that taxpayer dollars are used wisely. But this needs to be done in a clear and transparent fashion, with mutually understood milestones and clearly stated potential consequences for not achieving them. I look forward to working with you, Mr. Smith, and my colleagues on the committee to address these concerns and to ensure that you have the direction, tools, and resources you need to help ensure that we're using our abundant fossil fuel energy resources as wisely and responsibly as possible. Thank you, and I yield back to balance my time.
Thank the gentlelady. Let me introduce our witness today. Our witness today is the Honorable Chris Smith, Assistant Secretary for Fossil Energy at the U.S. Department of Energy. Prior to his confirmation in 2014, Assistant Secretary Smith served as Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for Fossil Energy and as Deputy Assistant Secretary for Oil and Natural Gas. Assistant Secretary Smith received his bachelor's degree in engineering management from West Point and his MBA from Cambridge. I now recognize Assistant Secretary Smith for 5 minutes to present his testimony. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and it's a pleasure to appear again before this committee, so thank you very much for having me here today. Today we're seeing new opportunities and challenges for our fossil energy resources. This was highlighted in the recent climate agreement in Paris. With the United States leadership, 190 countries submitted plans to reduce their carbon emissions to address climate change. COP21 was an important first step, but it was only a first step. The mandate coming out of Paris is that we must continue to innovate. That's the idea behind mission innovation, a landmark international effort to double clean energy research and development over the next 5 years. Mr. Chairman, in the clean energy economy of the future, there will be those who build the technologies and there will be those who buy them. The U.S. must be a builder and a leader in this new economy. We have a leg up in this race. Innovation is something that we do well here in America and at the Department of Energy. The Department is primarily a research organization focused on developing clean energy technologies from wind to solar, from geothermal to nuclear. But one of the most important things that we are doing in our work is to enable the sustainable use of our coal and natural gas resources. That's what we do through my office's research and development program, and that's the core of our contribution to mission innovation. The President's final budget emphasized the importance of this work with a $31 million increase in those core activities consistent with mission innovation. And through your funding, Congress also recognizes the importance of fossil energy research and development. This R&D includes in-house research at NETL, the National Energy Technology Laboratory, the only government-owned and government-operated laboratory in DOE, where we are working with our partners to advance innovative technologies like CCS and advanced power systems to ensure the sustainable use of natural gas and coal. And just today, we announced the selection of Penn State to establish and lead a new university coalition for fossil energy research, which will focus on the challenges to fossil energy-based technologies. I'd like to add that we're also working with those communities that have been impacted by market pressures on coal, including exploring commercial opportunities for extracting rare earth elements from coal. This is important to those communities and to the nation, since China is currently the dominant source for those materials. We also sponsor a portfolio of major demonstration projects which are critical to commercializing carbon capture, utilization, and storage. These projects, along with our regional partnerships, have stored nearly 12 million metric tons of CO2. As you know, however, the developments of any complicated innovative technology will face difficulties. Some projects won't reach completion, and I've had the opportunity to talk with some of you about the Texas Clean Energy Project, but we're also seeing real progress. For example, NRG's Petronova 240-megawatt post-combustion project will begin full capacity operation next January. Southern Company's Kemper project is preparing gas fires for the first lignite feed and syngas production and is scheduled for commercial startup by third quarter of this year. ADM's industrial CCS project will achieve full CO2 injection rate by early 2017, and the Air Products project is expected to capture and store 3 million metric tons of CO2 by this summer. Going forward, we'll soon select a 10-megawatt pilot project to test the next generation of carbon capture technologies. We also have the opportunity to strengthen our contribution to mission innovation. Our FY17 budget proposes that an initiative that would build on FE R&D advances to bring to market revolutionary methods and technologies that capture, use, and store CO2 from power plants, as well as from industrial sources. Fossil Energy Research and Development is also pursuing innovative ways to safely and sustainably develop our gas resources, including gas hydrates. R&D includes well-designed and engineering, induced seismicity, and technologies to treat produced waste for reuse. We're also working to reduce methane leaks from our natural gas infrastructure. That's why, in the wake of Aliso Canyon, we've partnered with the Department of Transportation on a new interagency task force on natural gas storage safety, the safety of integrity of the nation's natural gas infrastructure. We're also collaborating with transportation to better understand and mitigate risks associated with the transportation of conventional and tight crude oils. Mr. Chairman, innovation is critical to meeting the challenges of climate change and the demands of a low-carbon future. The Department of Energy is committed to developing innovative fossil energy technologies to meet those challenges and secure U.S. leadership in the global clean energy economy. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that the committee might have. And again, thank you for giving me the opportunity to appear here today.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Chair now recognizes himself for 5 minutes. In your opinion, Mr. Smith, what is the appropriate role of government in fossil energy research and development? And let me be specific. In other words, what is the right balance of investments between applied energy research versus the demonstration and commercialization of energy technologies for fossil energy? That's kind of a two-part question. I mean, let me restate it. In your opinion, what is the appropriate role of government in fossil energy research and development? I'll let you take that one first.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And that's a big question. I mean, that's the basis of our entire budget. So the role of my program is to develop those clean energy technologies that are going to ensure that all forms of domestic energy are relevant in the economy of the future. The Department of Energy is a technological organization. That's what we do. We develop technologies from wind to solar to enhanced geothermal to biofuels to nuclear. An important part of all of our goals, be it innovation, job creation, energy security, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, is to ensure that all forms of domestic energy remain relevant. And so the core of our program is carbon capture and sequestration technologies, ensuring that those technologies move forward so that all forms of energy are reliable and part of the future for us.
Well, let me say this: when you're focusing on, and as you know, in my district, Port Arthur, Texas, with Air Products, the project that you and I were able to be there for the groundbreaking on, a very good project, a lot of carbon sequestration captured, and you know, just the success of the project. Do you remember? Was that $460 million?
Of that order.
So somewhere in that area, and they've captured, I think, according to your statement, up to 3 million tons now of CO2?
3 million tons for that project.
What does that cost per ton if you divide that out?
We'd have to do the math on that, Mr. Chairman.
460 million divided by 3 million tons.
Right.
That's a lot of millions of dollars per ton, okay? It seems to me like what's happening is when you go to focusing on carbon CO2 capture, that it's kind of like closing the barn door once the cow gets out, because that's on the back end of the energy chain, so to speak. You know, you're using fossil fuel energy, which, as we noted earlier, is 80% of the world's energy consumption, or energy usage, rather. And I think they're saying probably still as much as 40% by 2050. So when you focus on the back end of fossil fuel energy, doesn't that take your focus away from innovation and technology on the front end?
Well, I'm not sure I agree with that characterization, Mr. Chairman. The important thing that we have to work on, and I agree with some of the statements that you made in your opening statement about the importance of innovating, the importance of early stage technology, the importance of pushing the envelope in that way. And also agree very strongly with some things that the ranking member mentioned in his technology, that the challenge of these projects is not the technology per se, but it's some of the commercial issues around pushing forward, improving these technologies and doing the demonstrations in an environment in which it's free for companies to emit as much CO2 as they want to in the environment. You don't have to pay for that. So there's not a way for companies to capture the very strong positive externalities that you get from capturing that CO2. Therefore, we have to work with the industry to make sure that we're doing demonstrations like the one we've done in your district that you and I got to do the groundbreaking on. It's important to show and demonstrate that those technologies are available, that they work, that you get real projects built, so that coal and natural gas can continue to be part of our energy mix.
But in all fairness, Mr. Smith, when you look at that project, $460 million, 60% of it was paid for by the American Reinvestment and Recovery Act, if I remember.
Indeed.
So I don't know what that math is, but and it was a great project and a great plan in our district and led to a lot of jobs. But realistically speaking, DOE, in my opinion, your focus needs to be on improving that energy efficiency, not on capturing what's considered by some to be on the back end, you know, an undesirable energy, a fuel. And so when you focus on capturing the emissions, if you will, on the backside, you're reducing your ability to actually focus on innovating on the front end. And no project, I mean, I don't think any project can be built with 100% free market business money, because when the government provided 60% of that money to that project, of course it could be built. But I don't think you can duplicate that.
Well, again, Mr. Chairman, in this current market, that's necessary because it's free to emit as much carbon pollution to the environment as you want to. I mean, the optimal thing for a company to do is to run their plant and just put that pollution into the environment, because it doesn't cost anything.
Well, and now I'm going to respectfully disagree, and I'm running over here because we live in our districts. I represent the Gulf Coast of Texas, 5 ports, more than any other member of Congress. 60% of the nation's jet fuel is produced in our district. It's 20%, almost 20% of the nation's gasoline east of the Rockies, so a lot of energy production. Right. And those of us who live and work there, we want clean air for our kids, and clean air and clean water. We just do. And those industries do too, and the communities do too, and they strive to be as clean as possible. But we could go on for a long time here, and I appreciate you being here, and I'm way over my time, so I'm going to yield now for questions to the ranking member of the whole committee. Ms. Johnson.
Well, thank you. Didn't realize I'd be called out of order. Mr. Smith, roughly how much of the fossil fuel energy R&D budget would you consider to be relevant to climate mitigation, both domestically and if we can export these technologies around the world? And in the context of mission innovation, how does it make sense for so many of these programs to receive such significant cuts or be eliminated entirely?
Thank you very much for the question. So if you look at our entire $600 million budget request, I'd characterize the vast majority of those projects as being relevant to reducing greenhouse gas emissions and promoting cleaner energy. The core of our program is the carbon capture and sequestration efforts, capturing CO2 out of power systems, out of industrial sources, capturing that CO2 and storing it permanently so that CO2 does not go into the environment. In the oil and gas program, we're focused on environmental sustainability and safety. So I'd say, overall, if we look at our budget, the overwhelmingly vast majority of the work that we do is very much relevant to the challenge of the clean energy economy of the future. In terms of our budget is consistent with the idea of mission innovation, which is a doubling of clean energy R&D over the next 5 years. And in fact, we've got a core of our program that is directly relevant to the challenge of mission innovation. That core has been increased from $533 million to $564 million, so that's a $31 million increase. At the same time, we've had some successes in our program, and we're rolling off of certain efforts which allow us to gain some efficiencies. For example, in our carbon storage program, we are moving from the injection phase in some of our major regional partnerships to long-term monitoring and verification. That is a less costly phase of that research, just as important, but less costly. And what it allows us to do is, in a environment of very challenging budgets, for us to reduce funding in some areas as we make some advances or as some of the technologies become less relevant, and focus those funds on areas that we think are going to be particularly relevant for the types of topics that are going to be important for mission innovation. Early TRL level research and development that's going to be truly transformational in reducing the cost for capturing CO2.
Hypothetically, if the department's request for $1.6 billion of additional so-called mandatory spending for clean energy research is authorized during this Congress, wouldn't it make sense for fossil R&D to receive some of the additional funding?
Well, indeed, Congresswoman. Again, the core of our program, we actually are increasing, and that's something that we'd like to, we'd be happy to detail in more granularity. But we've added additional $31 million to those core programs that are relevant to mission innovation. And over time, since I came into this role back in 2013, so the 2014 budget was the budget that my first budget I got to work on, which was an R&D budget of about $430 million. And that has increased by 40%, since the FY14 request to this year of $600 million. So again, in an environment of tremendously challenging budget pressures, I think our recognition of the importance of this challenge has increased, as has our budget request and the successes that we're having in some of our programs.
Well, considering that fossil fuel energy generates over 60% of our electricity, don't you think it would be wise to at least a fraction of that proposed increase and put it toward technology, development and demonstration efforts to reduce environmental impacts of coal and natural gas? Or even mission-driven basic research that could be handed off to industry when applicable?
So our materials programs are and remain very important, everything from advanced computational efforts through our major demonstrations. We've got a very wide range of programs that are doing the early phase research and development on the transformational technologies like chemical looping and pressurized oxygen combustion, all the way through the major demonstrations, which we are working very intently with our collaborators to move forward and be successful with. So again, I concur with your observation that these technologies are important, and indeed, I think that we're putting the right effort into them.
Thank you. I yield back. Time's expired.
I thank the gentlelady. The gentleman from California is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Let me just note that I think that the premise that we're operating on in this hearing is just wrong. And I think it started right with Mr. Grayson, whose opinions I deeply respect but disagree with, when he said that this is all about air pollution. And CO2, it's about CO2, it's not about air pollution. Pollution, by the definition of not most, but many very prominent scientists, is something that endangers human life, endangers the health of human beings. What we have here, and the hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars that we're talking about, is all based on the idea that CO2 is heating our planet. And this theory, which we have to all understand, pushing this theory, this administration, is basically by putting such an emphasis on it, being willing to sign agreements that put enormous power in the hands of global decision makers instead of just American decision makers, as well as have a tremendous impact on jobs, especially in the coal industry, where we're talking about tens of thousands of jobs that are being lost. I mean, I'm very happy to hear we're trying to do something to help them come through a crisis when men and women who have earned a living and supported their families, all this, are now just being thrown out because of a theory. And I say the theory because there are hundreds of scientists who do not believe that the global warming theory based on CO2 that is heating our planet is correct, whether it's Dr. Freeman Dyson of Cornell or William Happer of Princeton. Those are just two of hundreds of scientists who just disagree. And it seems to me what we've got here, when we're talking about the money that's being spent and the shift, forcibly shifting a reliance from coal to natural gas and to wind and solar, et cetera, is running roughshod, basically, over the livelihood and the well-being of many American working people. And you're not the one to ask to explain global warming, the global warming theory, but when we're talking about CO2 reduction, what are the other benefits that you can see that justify this enormous expense and this enormous, dislocation of our economy in order to accomplish these goals? Is there anything else but, when you say air pollution, I don't accept the fact that CO2 in any way causes human health problems. And air pollution, to me, is worth trying to do some things to try to protect health. There's no doubt about that, but trying to basically fulfill this or base our operations on the CO2 theory of global warming, I don't believe is justified. Maybe you can tell us what else beside global warming is being benefited by these expensive and dramatic changes that you're involved in.
Well, thank you very much, Congressman, for the question. So there's a lot there, clearly in that question. So maybe I'll refer back to COP21, the global climate event late last year. Went into COP21 with the expectation that maybe 60, maybe 70, maybe 50 countries would put forth INDCs, their initial nationally determined contributions, real steps that countries are going to take in order to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. With U.S. leadership, we ended up with 190 countries, essentially all the participating countries, made specific commitments to address climate change, to address anthropogenic CO2. A remarkable outcome. I mean, it's remarkable to get 190 countries to agree to anything, much less something as difficult to address as this, as fundamental as it is to our ideas around energy security, and indeed something that you actually have to take steps to address. 190 countries, led by the United States. And so in terms of an emerging consensus, I mean, there's an emerged scientific consensus around this existential need to address carbon pollution.
So it's all based on the CO2 theory then, what you're talking about. When I say if there's other things and you're talking about CO2, let me ask you, does CO2, is there an indication? I just visited some hot houses where they're growing different vegetables and plants, and I noted that they were pumping CO2 into these hothouses to grow plants that would have a greater production of food. Even here in our own country, we do that. If we are reducing the CO2 in the atmosphere, is that also going to result in a lower production of food? I mean, all these people have a consensus about air pollution. Is there a side impact as well, beside the dislocation of people's jobs, that there'd be less food produced in the world?
We're looking at beneficial uses of CO2 that include taking CO2 for algae production. So there are useful things that you can do with CO2, and that's been part of our program. It's been part of the EERE's program that looks at renewable energy. So there certainly are beneficial uses of anthropogenic CO2, but overall there is an enormous challenge of reducing greenhouse gas emissions so that we can get the climate to sustainable levels. That's the core of our program. That's the reason why we're working on this.
Honest people can disagree with that, so thank you.
Right. And I did want to address this idea of forcibly shifting from coal, right? And And I've spent a lot of time in coal-producing country. I've spent some time with the governor in West Virginia. We have a laboratory that's based in Morgantown, West Virginia, National Energy Technology Laboratory. Coal country is under tremendous pressures, but there are market forces which are impacting coal. You have trillions and trillions of cubic feet of natural gas that are available and at commercial quantities that were not available years ago. And that reduction in the price of natural gas has put a tremendous pressure on coal, that along with the need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So I'd say that the program, our efforts within the Office of Natural Gas, within the Office of Fossil Energy, are to ensure that all forms of energy remain relevant.
Yeah, we do need to move on, Mr. Smith, so I appreciate that. Chair now recognizes the ranking member for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Regarding my friend from California and what he just said, if he thinks that carbon dioxide doesn't cause any human health problems, I invite him to put a plastic bag over his head, tie it tightly around his neck, and see what happens next. He says they're always trying to do that to him anyway. Mr. Smith, tell me your sense of what the term corporate welfare means.
I would demur from offering a definition there, Mr. Chairman. Is that a question, or Mr. Ranking Member, is that a question in reference to our program or something we're
I'd like
trying
to know, well, it's a question. I'd like to know whether you think that anything that could be conceived as corporate welfare is properly a function of your office.
So the function of our office is to make sure that we are moving forward and deploying technologies that can be necessary for the clean energy economy of the future. And that's what we do. And in order to do that, we have to work together with industry, work together with academia, work together with our network of national laboratories. It's important for us to have corporate partners, because that's the way that you push innovation into the marketplace, and that's what we do.
Well, would you want to see in your office, for instance, a $100 million effort to try to improve fracking technology? And if not, why not?
Well, early on, we did have a major effort for hydraulic fracturing. I mean, the very first horizontal laterals, I think.
I'm talking about today.
Well, the nature of our program is, for us, a success is something where you have an early stage investment where the government innovates. We create, we put out data and results and outcomes that companies can then subsequently come in and invest in. And so we're certainly way down the path in terms of hydraulic fracturing. I mean, I came from Chevron's, where I was before I came to government. Companies do this very well. I don't see a government role in helping companies do things that there's already a commercial motivation to move forward on.
Do you happen to know what Exxon's annual research and development budget is?
I don't know off the top of my head.
It's actually bigger than yours. It's $1 billion a year, and it's been $1 billion every year for the past 5 years.
Right.
So do you think there's some need to try to make sure that your office is not doing, in a duplicative way at the expense of the taxpayers, the same work that a company like Exxon would be doing?
We very specifically do exactly that.
All right, explain to me how you do that.
Well, so we're constantly in conversation with the market, with market players. They're our partners in a lot of these efforts. We know where they are in terms of, be it extractive technologies for natural gas or technologies to commercialize carbon capture, for example. So, we're in touch with the market. We see where the market's going. We monitor market forces. We understand what investments are being put in place. And we have to identify those scientific challenges that, absent an active government role, would not be filled, and which have an important impact on the public good. And that's basically our annual budget process.
And by important impact on the public good, you mean what you and I were both referring to earlier, this idea that pollution is an externality, that companies have no incentives to deal with it unless we create an incentive. And if we don't create an incentive, then it's incumbent upon the government to promote research and sometimes even regulate in order to take care of the effects of that externality. In fact, you used the phrase earlier, positive externalities that you get from capturing CO2. That was your phrase, not mine. What did you mean by that?
So if you capture that CO2 and you store it instead of pumping it into the environment, that avoided emissions has a definite benefit. And right now, the market doesn't pay companies for that. If you're an emitter, you can emit as much CO2 as you want to, and you don't get charged for doing that. So there is a positive benefit to reducing emissions. In fact, our program is approaching 12 million tons of CO2 that we've stored through our R&D efforts and through our major demonstrations. That's an enormous benefit. I mean, that is a positive thing. Right now, companies can't reap that benefit, and therefore you have to find other creative ways to make sure that these projects get built, the technologies continue to advance. Otherwise, companies aren't going to work on these things, and we think that they're important.
You're developing ways to sequester CO2, the actual know-how, how to do that. That's what you're doing in your office. What's the next step after that? Once you're successful, what's the next step after that?
Well, I mean, the challenge that we have is continuing to advance new systems that lower costs, that fundamentally change the way that we combust hydrocarbons, the way that we capture CO2. So, two of the projects that we're looking at kind of going forward for new pilots would be pressurized oxy-combustion, using oxygen to combust the coal, and therefore you get a very concentrated stream of water vapor and then CO2 on the back end, so you don't have to capture the CO2. That's kind of pre-captured. The second thing we're working on is chemical looping, which is another novel way of combusting CO2 that you end up with a very pure stream of combusting carbon, so you get a very pure stream of CO2. Those are systems that that need further research, they need further development, they need to be investigated at the pilot scale, but could take an enormous stride towards reducing the cost of capture and ensuring that all forms, including coal, remain relevant in the economy of the future.
But here's my point. You're not just doing this for the sake of advancing scientific knowledge. You're doing this so that we can actually sequester carbon on a large scale and reduce pollution, correct?
That is correct.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you very much. And I will take the next set of questions. First, I want to thank the Secretary for coming out to Southern California and to Aliso Canyon. Not that it's hard to come out to Southern California, but I appreciate him coming out and having the hearing. And it was one of the biggest incidents of the year, without a doubt. And so all of my questions will be around Aliso Canyon and around the gas leak that plagued our district for 118 days and continues to have serious issues. Can you tell me what the connection is to the states? In certain states, we have, like in California, we have the CPUC. We obviously have the governor's office that does an awful lot of these types of regulations and issues. And then we have CARB, and I could go on, and I'm sure everyone's state could go on and on. So can you tell me from the DOE what their connection is, what their stance is on connecting with the states and reducing and the regulations that come out of the states?
Okay. Well, thank you for the question. So we're the technical organization. We do research and development. We've got a tremendous resource with the network of national laboratories, thousands and thousands of researchers and scientists and engineers that cover the gamut of scientific knowledge, much of which is relevant to challenges like this. So our primary role at the Department of Energy, we're not the regulators. That's not our job. However, we do have a very deep scientific bench that is really relevant to state and local and federal authorities when it comes to understanding risks, understanding how to mitigate risks, quantifying concerns, helping local and state entities come up with plans for mitigating those risks. We think we're an important resource. And indeed, much of the research and development that we do is geared towards quantifying concerns that the communities have around the long-term safety and sustainability of our fossil energy systems. We think that's an important mission that we have, and one that we look for opportunities to work with state authorities.
And absolutely, I understand the regulatory issues and who is in charge of what, but
right.
Can you tell me that, in other words, if it wasn't an emergency, would you be reaching out to some of these states that do some of these areas that have these types of issues, that do high energy output, that do underground piping, that do these types of things that can be dangerous, and we've been doing them for 70 or 80 years, and we've learned an awful lot. Are you reaching out to those groups and giving them your expertise and maybe working on some of those issues so that they, when they do regulations, they're effective regulations and they're, the industry is able to continue on with the regulation?
Indeed, Congressman. I mean, we have numerous interactions with, say, from everything from the Southern State Energy Board to the American Association of Petroleum Geologists. We have ongoing conversation with state geologists throughout the United States. I mean, there's myriad entities that we work with to, and it goes to, that communication goes two ways. I mean, we get great inputs from states in terms of things that they're learning and their processes, which helps us shape our research and development program. And then we also look for opportunities to share things that we're learning so that states can be more effective regulators. States, of course, again, we're not the regulators. States are covetous of their regulatory autonomy, which I think is important.
Right.
But at the same time, every state has, well, states have different concerns, but a lot of them are similar. And a lot of things that states are concerned with are the very issues that we are investigating within the Office of Fossil Energy, with the National Energy Technology Laboratory. So indeed, I look forward to having further opportunities to collaborate with the state of California and with other entities throughout the United States on these important issues.
And very quickly, so we've seen the Pipes Act that has moved through for underground piping. And there's been an amendment that has been kind of to put a regulation across the board in the federal government so that states are not doing, one's doing this, one state's doing this, one state's doing this. How would you feel as, is that a good line in the sand to say that the federal government should be doing that? Or should we allow the states to just do whatever you want and there is no federal regulation?
Well, Congressman, I'm not familiar enough with the amendment to speak specifically to that particular amendment or to that piece of proposed legislation. But certainly there is a balance to be drawn. And again, we're not the regulator, but you know, whatever entity is in charge of putting in place rules or promulgating those rules, the Department of Energy would look for opportunities to collaborate to make sure that rules that are put in place represent common sense regulation that's consistent with the science and the quantified risks that we've worked on.
Very good. Thank you very much. And I'll recognize the distinguished gentleman from Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Secretary, thanks for being here. I've just, listening to this conversation and representing the suburbs of Denver, where we have a lot of activity in the environmental community, obviously have substantial production of oil and gas, and we have coal in our state, so it's a combination of things. And, there are some in my state that would completely do away with any fossil fuel production whatsoever because they believe with everything in their soul that that's causing the planet to warm and could, lead to the extinction of all of us. Then there are those that are in the industry saying, some who say, well, you know what? We're going to produce, we have a very reliable energy sources here, whether it's oil and gas or coal, and we're going to just produce. And I want to compliment you and DOE for trying to find a way that uses innovation, imagination, invention to take a plentiful energy source that we have and yet recognize the environmental problems that it may be causing. And so, thank you for that. I'm glad to see you all play a role in trying to take the brains that we have and find a way to make these things work without damaging the planet. So, but my questions are on the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, okay? And one of the things that we've seen, and I used to be a bankruptcy lawyer and I cut my teeth on oil and gas bankruptcies. And we watched the Saudis, who can produce at a much lower price than we can, back in the day, drop it from $30 a barrel to $7 a barrel. We've watched them now pump into a lower demand type of economy, take it from $107 a barrel down to 30, and now we're at around 40, 45. And I know DOE has some role with respect to the Strategic Petroleum Reserves, which Congress has tapped to help fund a couple of items out there, whether it's some of our transportation, our budget generally. Can you explain to us, and maybe it's not within your jurisdiction of your department within DOE, but can you explain to us how DOE analyzes, when we fill up the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, when we draw down on it? I mean, is that a question that you're comfortable with?
Thank you, Congressman. So the, as you know, oil prices are very volatile. In the 1998 timeframe, we're looking at $18, $20 prices. 10 years later, in 2008, we were up to $140. Oil prices subsequently crashed down to the 20s and are now back up to the 40s, 44, 45. So a remarkably volatile commodity for something upon which our entire economy relies. I mean, the overwhelmingly vast majority of miles that Americans travel are fueled by oil. So we still have a very important strategic link back to oil, and our economy has a very high level of vulnerability to spiking oil prices. We are importing fewer barrels than we import fewer barrels from other countries than we produce domestically for the first time in decades, which I think is it's a tremendous step forward. It reduces our reliance, helps us balance in trade and job creation. I mean, I think these are all positive things. But the Strategic Petroleum Reserve remains very relevant. I think we still definitely need this reserve to protect our economy. It's the one thing that we have to protect us against price spikes. The global markets are well supplied now, as we see from the lower oil prices, but it's still a very uncertain world. So the reserve remains important. We've been instructed to sell barrels, both through the Bipartisan Budget Act and the Transportation Act. I'm the executive branch. We execute the laws passed by Congress, so we will operate consistent with the letter and the spirit of that law. One positive thing that we get out of that is that there is about $2 billion that will go back into the modernization of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, to make sure that reserve remains ready and that we have facilities to push incremental barrels out into the market in a way that protects our economy. So we're going to execute that mission in a way that's positive for the SPRO.
Well, and I just hope that you buy low and sell high. So thank you. With that, I'll yield back to the chair.
So you were a stock trader as well as a lawyer. Okay, the gentleman now recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Nagelbauer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Smith, thank you for being here. In your prepared testimony, you discussed the DOZ's ongoing research and development in the carbon storage focused primarily on the permanent geological storage of captured CO2 from fossil fuel systems. But in your testimony, there's no mention of putting the captured CO2 to use in enhanced oil recovery. Similarly, the entire FY 2017 budget proposal mentions enhanced oil recovery only twice in the context of past projects. Given the potential for cost-effective carbon storage, can you explain why facilitating EOR is not included in a major part of the DOE's carbon storage program?
Thank you very much for the question, Congressman, and it's actually a really good one. So as we look at the necessity to get these projects moved forward and built, enhanced oil recovery is, I think, as important as it has ever been in terms of incentivizing these projects. If you take that CO2, you capture it, you put it into a pipeline and use it to produce an incremental barrel that otherwise would have remained in the ground, you can take that value and use it to pay for the project itself. In fact, we've got a major demonstration in the state of Texas, just south of Houston, the Petronova project with NRG, that's doing exactly that. It's a 240 megawatt project that's using enhanced oil recovery, and the total all-in economics of the recovered barrels are important for the overall project economics. Now, when it comes to research, I don't see a direct R&D role for the Department of Energy in terms of enhanced oil recovery. In fact, that's something the industry has been doing for decades and does very well. Now, as a methodology for taking that CO2 and putting it to beneficial use, I think that is tremendously important. One thing that we have proposed are tax credits for sequestration, so that there would be a tax credit that you'd receive for oil that goes into EOR. We think that's important to incentivize the activity to push those projects forward. But in terms of an R&D role, that has not been at the center of our program, simply because there's a very, very strong commercial drive for private industry to put research and development and activities and capital into that area. And in fact, the industry has gotten a lot better at it.
So your focus then for your research is just cost-effective storage and not necessarily looking at alternatives. I mean, the enhanced oil recovery, I mean, using the CO2 for enhanced oil recovery has been a very good thing for the oil industry, and according to you, is good for the environment as well. So if we're not focusing, if we're focusing on storage, then why are we not focusing more on, if it works in the oil industry, might work in other areas?
Well, I mean, it comes back to a question I got earlier, I believe from Mr. Grayson, about how we think about where we invest. We've got finite dollars, we've got a limited budget, so where do we focus those dollars? We want to focus those dollars on areas that have a benefit to the taxpayer, have a benefit to the nation in terms of energy security, job creation, environment, but are areas in which industry will not invest in itself. But for the involvement of the government, that this research wouldn't occur. So when we look at saline aquifers, for example, that's certainly an area in which we think that we do have to put a lot of effort. Otherwise, they're not companies that are lining up to do that research and development right now, simply because it's free to emit the carbon dioxide. Enhanced oil recovery, we think there's an enormous driver to invest in that research and development. In fact, we see companies doing that. So most of the R&D that we do is going to be focused on saline aquifer. We will say that the major demonstrations, however, are using enhanced oil recovery as the disposal method, simply because it's positive for the economics of the project. So we're getting some bang for our buck in terms of incentivizing EOR projects, but it's not a focus for our research. Again, simply because it's something that the private sector is running pretty hard on.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. The chair recognizes Eric Swalwell from California for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Assistant Secretary Smith. I'm interested in your testimony with respect to rare earth elements. I had a bill last year that received an overwhelming majority of support in the House of Representatives to have the Department of Energy play a critical role in finding mines in this country where we could harvest these elements, which, as you know, are used to make jet engines, cell phones, laptops, anti-missile systems, and the like. However, because you needed 2/3 under that procedural vote, it did not pass. I'm still hopeful that our chairman, Lamar Smith, who supported the bill, and Majority Leader McCarthy, who also supported this bipartisan bill, will bring it back. But in your testimony, you referred to the National Energy Laboratory researching the feasibility of extracting rare earth elements from coal and coal byproducts. In March, 9 projects were selected to look into this topic. I appreciate that you are working on this, and I wanted to know if you could give us an update on what is the current state of the 9 projects selected in March, and which rare earth elements do each of these projects hope to harness? When do you expect results?
Oh, thank you very much for the question. So this is a project that we've got some enthusiasm for and that we're pushing forward on. We've already had some really interesting results in terms of increasing our understanding of the occurrence of rare earth elements, not only in geologic settings where you'd have some mining challenges, but also in tailings, that come out of the coal mining process, and also in coal ash. So we've done some work. The NETL is really published some groundbreaking papers. We're increasing our understanding of areas in which we might be able to find rare earth elements in commercial concentrations that, as you note, might reduce the reliance of the United States on importing some of these important elements from overseas, primarily from China.
And would this require burning the coal?
Well, in some cases, I mean, if you're looking at coal ash, I mean, what you essentially have are some kind of pre-combusted, pre-pulverized mass that it then helps you in terms of recovering the rare earth element. We see some promise there. We also see some promise in tailings, kind of in the mined residue that you get out of the mining process, and we also see some potential in going out and extracting it in mining operations that are directly that are geared towards recovering rare earth elements. And part of our research is going to be exactly how do you extract the element. That's kind of the core of how do you is the core of our research. That's really the heart of the scientific inquiry that we're putting forth presently. So you mentioned I think we have 8 or 9 solicitations that are in the process of being awarded or they're right at the award stage now. So over the course of this year, I think we will know a lot more about the results from that work. But we've already published some work that helps us understand the potential, the commercial potential for rare earth elements. And again, it's something that in coal-producing parts of the United States that have been negatively and adversely impacted by reduction in coal use, this is something that has some promise for bringing some economic activity to those areas.
Great. Thank you. Yield back.
Thank the gentleman. Mr. Loudermilk, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Smith, for being here. Secretary Moniz regularly states that innovation is one of the most important aspects of advancing energy technology. However, it's very clear that clean power plan will devastate the coal industry. My question is this the right way to innovate, to actually harm an entire industry so others will prosper, or wouldn't we be better served investing more in fossil energy research and technology development than trying to regulate our way to success?
Well, thank you for the question, Congressman. And this kind of steers us back to a point that we've had an opportunity to discuss a couple times in this hearing. It's difficult to push forward with some of these clean energy technologies when it's free to emit as much carbon pollution as you want to. What the Clean Power Plan does is provide some incentives or some mandates and incentives for states to reach certain predetermined levels of CO2 emissions, and it's an all-of-the-above approach. You can meet those targets using whatever methodology one chooses, be it wind or solar or nuclear, or in the case of the technologies that I'm working on, carbon capture and sequestration, reduce greenhouse gas emissions coming out of industrial sources and out of power sources. So we believe it's very important that under the Clean Power Plan that states will have the option of continuing to use domestically produced sources of fossil energy, including oil and natural gas, and that we're developing those technologies to make sure that there are cost-effective ways of capturing CO2 out of those sources.
Another question, the Energy Information Administration recently reported that coal dropped to 29% of the U.S. utility scale power generation, down from almost 38% last year. At the current rate of regulatory impact, aren't the coal and research and development programs at DOE going to be a little too late?
Well, I mean, we're seeing natural gas prices down at $2.15, I think, today. So you're seeing very low natural gas prices. They've gone down and beneath $2. And this was when I was in the industry not too long ago, and we're seeing close to double-digit natural gas prices. That has a big impact on decisions that electricity power generators make in terms of how they dispatch electricity. It's been a real challenge for coal country. It will continue to be a real challenge. But what we have to work on, I mean, that's a market force that we're not going to be able to unwind. And I'm not going to make any predictions about the future of commodity prices. I mean, natural gas prices are also volatile, and I don't think we can count on any particular price or any particular position in the dispatch curve of various forms of power generation. But what we do have to do is make sure that we're continuing to innovate on technologies to reduce greenhouse gas emissions out of all sources of energy. So we try not to chase the commodity curve. I mean, we can't say, well, a price is a certain place, and so therefore we're going to stop a research and development program. The challenges remain the same, and so we want to give some certainty to our researchers. And the road is long in this area.
And you mentioned the inexpensive natural gas production, and since 2010, according to Sierra Club, we've lost about a third of the country's coal capacity. It's been shut down because of the regulations of the EPA. But we've been able to avoid spikes in electricity costs because of the cheap natural gas. Would you agree that the electricity rates would have spiked much higher after those coal shutdowns if it wasn't for fracking and the cheap natural gas?
Well, I mean, first I challenge the characterization that coal is being challenged by EPA regulations, and that's the cause of the challenges around coal. I mean, I just don't think that's correct. I mean, market forces have had an enormous impact on coal, and that's been driven by the trillions and trillions of cubic feet of natural gas that are available now that weren't available 10 years ago.
But in Georgia, we had 3 coal plants shut down because of EPA regulations, but you're saying that the EPA regulation hasn't had an effect on coal production?
I'm saying that the major effect, the major challenge that coal faces is the fact that natural gas prices are $2 and they're not $10. And that has a big impact on the way that power generators decide to build plants. But to your question, I think that the advances around hydraulic fracturing, advances around horizontal laterals, our ability to extract shale gas out of shale formations has been tremendously positive for the United States. We're going to be net exporters of liquefied natural gas. When I last saw the chairman, we're down in Sabine Pass seeing the very first LNG export terminal that I worked on when it was an import terminal, when I was in industry. So this
You need to work on some more of those.
Well, we've worked on quite a few of them, right?
And so, I mean, from what I'm hearing is because of the fracking and the access to the cheap natural gas we have here in the U.S. has definitely helped offset some of the loss of our coal production and keeping the prices down for the consumers.
Indeed. I mean, 40% of our power generation comes from coal. Okay. A big percent comes from natural gas, and they're both important.
Yeah. Last quick question, if I may, Mr. Chairman. There is a movement to keep it in the ground, which would stop fracking and access to this natural gas. I mean, we actually have some presidential candidates who are campaigning on this. We're going to keep it in the ground, put a lock on accessing these commodities through fracking and natural gas. Would that not cause a spike in electricity production? Should, as we've just been discussing, the access to these commodities is what's kept the prices low as we shut down coal. Would that not have the opposite effect then?
The increasing production of natural gas has had a very positive impact on our economy. It's had a positive impact on the environment. We understand, I mean, there are concerns about some of the risks, but those are things that we've quantified, and we believe that this is a process that can be managed safely. And so we think that natural gas is an important part of the clean energy economy in the future. In fact, we've been kind of explicit around that view.
Okay. Thank you, sir. I will yield back.
Thank the gentleman. The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Beasy, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Secretary Smith, thank you for being here today. It's always good to see someone else from Fort Worth on Capitol Hill. So welcome here today. And wanted to ask if you could touch very briefly on the Texas Clean Energy Project. As you know, that is of huge importance to the state, and wanted to see what you know about it, and if you can just briefly get me caught up on that.
Well, thank you very much for the question, Congressman. So the Texas Clean Energy Project is a project that was designed to, it's one of the major demonstrations designed to capture CO2 coming out of a plant in Texas. It's a project that we've been working on for the last several years, along with a company called Summit that's based in Washington State. Along with all of our major demonstrations, it's been a kind of an important part of our effort to ensure that technologies move from the desktop to the laboratory out into the real world and get built and developed. We've recently made, over time, we've allowed this project to have additional time to meet some major milestones. Whenever we have a major project like this, we put in place very well thought out controls to ensure that we're getting the best value for the taxpayer. That project has some milestones that it has not met in terms of getting financing for the project. And so I've just recently sat down with the CEO of that company. We've discussed offering them a no-cost extension that would allow them to continue to try to develop the project at no additional cost to the taxpayer. Again, these are difficult projects. They're tough projects. This is a company that's been dogged in its pursuit of what we think is a really important project for us. I foresee them, trying to continue to raise additional funding for that project. But at this point, we're not. The U.S. government is not putting additional taxpayer funds towards that project.
Thank you very much for the update on that. And I want to shift over to sequestration. It appears that we've solved some key technological hurdles when it comes to sequestering CO2 in geological formations. But we still have a lot of challenges that we have to overcome in that area. And I wanted to ask you, what are some of the key hurdles left in DOE's research into carbon sequestration?
Well, thank you for the question. So we've got seven regional partnerships across the United States that are looking at the challenge of putting CO2 into geologic formations across the United States. And this is looking at a variety of depositional environments, a variety of geologic settings. So the geology in different parts of the United States is different, and therefore you have to do different types of research about how the effectiveness of storing CO2 in formations across the United States. The challenge of CO2 storage is that you are storing just enormous quantities of CO2, and that's one of the reasons why geologic storage in saline aquifers is what we see as being kind of the future of carbon storage. We've learned a lot in that process. We've been able to create a lot of data that we're able to provide in terms of the potential of storing CO2 in different areas. So we've put out atlases that show the potential for carbon storage, and we know that we've got a tremendous resource in the United States in terms of the storage potential for CO2. We're continuing to work on issues around monitoring and verification. We've got projects that have cycled out of the phase of injecting CO2 into the ground and have moved on to that medium-term monitoring and verification. So there's more work for us to do, but we're working very closely with state and local authorities. The end goal of all this effort is to be able to scientifically quantify the activity and the opportunity, and to provide regulatory authorities with the data that they need in order to create a robust permitting environment in the future in which we know that we're going to have to capture all this CO2 and store it in these geologic formations.
Has DOE researched the public relations and education aspect of sitting the CO2 pipelines and commercial storage sites?
Indeed. I mean, part of what we do, I mentioned the atlases and the other publications that the NETL puts out. I think that's an important part of the public outreach, so that we're clearly communicating the results of the project. People know, that we've understood the issues around long-term geologic storage, everything from wellbore stability all the way through induced seismic issues. It's important that we take any of these risks seriously, and that we clearly communicate the scientific research so that we're quantifying the risks. Additionally, projects like the ADM project that we're doing in Illinois have a component of creating a public or outreach center, so that we're able to communicate with the public so that they understand our research and the process that one would have to go through in order to accomplish one of these projects.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Chairman, in closing, I hope that Secretary Smith has had a chance to go back to his alma mater of Southwest High School and talk with their program. That they actually have a program at the school that trains people on exploration and the different aspects of energy and being a petroleum engineer specifically. And so hopefully you've had a chance to go back to Fort Worth ISD and do that. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll be back in Fort Worth this Friday, actually. So, all right.
Mark, did they have multiple classes when you were in high school? They weren't all just in one single room with a wood-burning stove?
No, we had moved past the schoolhouse and
Okay,
into the full school by the time I was there. Yeah.
All right, thank you. The gentleman yields back. The Gentlemen, the pride of East Texas, the Big Thicket, is recognized, and you've got a lot of forest out there, Dr. Babin, that uses CO2, I bet. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Those trees need lots of CO2. They give a lot of CO2, oxygen back for it, though. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Secretary. We appreciate you. And you had mentioned a Houston project a while ago, and would you give me the name of that?
That's the Petronova project. It's a collaboration with NRG, so it's a 240 megawatt post-combustion capture project that's just south of Houston, Texas.
Just south?
Just south of Houston,
Okay,
Texas.
all right, thank you. And I notice you're a graduate of West Point as well, right?
I am indeed.
Yeah, that's good. I have a son that went to the Naval Academy. Go Navy, beat Army.
Okay, beat Navy. Yeah.
Well, funding for the TCEP, for Texas Clean Energy Project, is a coal gasification project in Texas, which we've talked about a little bit today, was pulled to fund other priorities in the fiscal year 2017 budget. This committee has been working in a bipartisan manner to get to the bottom of the problems with the project. And we appreciate the letter that you sent in response to some of our questions about this project. And in your response, you referenced an internal review that your office conducted of the project before making the decision to rescind the funding. Can you commit to provide that review to this committee?
I'd be happy to respond to that for the record.
Okay, that'd be great. The DOE Inspector General released a special report on TCEP just last month. And in this report, the IG was very critical of DOE's management practices, particularly when it came to enforcing deadlines, cost ceilings, and managing risk for the taxpayers. Your office has overseen several large project failures, and it's clear that there is a systematic problem in the Office of Fossil Management for large commercialization projects. What steps have you taken to address these management issues?
Well, thank you for the question, Congressman, and that's obviously a big issue. So first, to address the IG report. So the bottom line on the IG report was that they recommended that the Department of Energy continues to not advance funds to the TCEP project. When we have a project like this, we take the overall award, which I think was around $450 million for the TCEP project, and we divide it up into phases. You know, phase one, which is the project development, and then phase two, which is construction and operation. And we have milestones within phase one that allow the applicant to get from phase one to phase two. These projects are difficult. Again, the primary difficulty is commercial. They're commercially difficult. You have to sell the CO2. You have to sell the urea offtake. You have to sell the power. You have to get your EPC contract in place. You have to get financing. So there's lots of moving parts, and you're trying to do this in an environment which, again, it's free to emit as much CO2 into the environment as you want to. So they're commercially difficult. They're important, and we worked with the Summit team, over time to give them more time to accomplish some of their milestones. We worked with them to advance some funding from phase two to phase one. Every time we do that, it's a case-by-case decision. I mean, we don't have our feet set in stone. We have to look at what the market's doing. We have to look at what progress is being made, and we have to look at what the risks are to the taxpayer of making the decision to advance funds from phase two to phase one. At some point, however, you decide that that's not the prudent thing to do in terms of getting the best outcome for the taxpayer, which is exactly what we did in this case. So we have to make some hard decisions in some cases. We'd love for all the projects to make it. But the bottom line is that these projects are difficult, and if we knew they're all going to make it, there probably would not be a role for the government to help push these along. So.
Let me follow up with something real quickly here. Looking at this and other failed or struggling projects in the fossil portfolio, the connecting thread seems to be the size and the goal of the project. It seems like when the Office of Fossil undertakes a large commercialization project, there are frequent problems and delays. The department has considerable expertise in research and development and a long history of success in fossil energy. Shouldn't DOE get the hint and focus on fossil technology R&D instead of investing in companies looking to commercialize energy technology?
Well, Congressman, we do both. I think that both are important roles for our department. So we invest in those early stage technologies, from controls to systems to materials to next generation technologies like pressurized oxy-combustion and chemical looping. We think that there's an important role for us there. We think there's also an important role for the major demonstrations. Throughout our 7 regional partnerships, we've got a number of very, very successful projects that, again, have stored almost 12 million tons of CO2 over time. We spoke about the project that we did with in Chairman Weber's district, the Air Products project, the Archer Daniels Midland project in Illinois, the Petronova project that I just spoke about. These are examples of taking ideas from the laboratory and putting them out into the field so that you're actually pouring concrete and bending rebar and erecting steel and getting projects built. They're difficult. If they were difficult, we wouldn't be working on them. And we learn something every time we do one of these things, but I would characterize our risk management methodology as being robust, as being sound. And again, we think that these are really, really important projects. And for the future of fossil energy and making sure that all of our sources of energy remain relevant. They're important for coal.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, thank you. My time has expired.
I thank the gentleman, and I want to thank Chairman or Secretary Smith for his valuable testimony, for being here, and the record will remain open for 2 weeks for additional comments and written questions from members. I do want to say in closing, however, though, that it's our opinion that I think it would be better that the DOE would focus on innovation rather than commercialization. Kind of leave as much of that to the private sector as we can. So we do thank you for being here, Secretary Smith, and this hearing is adjourned.